All right, so since the passage of the $1.9 trillion COVID relief package, Democrats have been sorting out exactly where they want to go next in their next big piece of legislation, and it looks like they've settled on infrastructure, but it looks like they're also going to be just kind of throwing every single thing that they want into this bill and making it sort of a catch-all bill that's going to include things like tax policy adjustments, healthcare, which is what we're going to get into with Bernie Sanders' suggestion in this article that we're about to get into, as well as infrastructure spending, job spending, etc. This is going to be a gigantic package, or at least should be a gigantic package, where because of the constraints of the process of budget reconciliation, Democrats obviously haven't abolished the filibuster, so the only way that they can get anything through, we know that Republicans are not going to work with them on any good legislation. So the only way that they're going to get anything through right now is through the process of budget reconciliation. So that's why they're just throwing everything into this bill, and why something like healthcare would be included in an infrastructure package. But here's a suggestion that Bernie Sanders has been rolling out. So let's get into this and talk about it. So Bernie Sanders pushes Medicare expansion in Dems' next big bill. The Vermont Independent is urging his party to force Medicare to enter negotiations with drug companies and use that revenue to pay for a huge expansion of the entitlement program. Sanders, who chairs the Senate Budget Committee, is aiming to lower Medicare's eligibility age from 65 to 55 or 60 years old and expand the program to cover dental work, glasses, eye surgeries, as well as hearing aids. So yeah, that ending part is pretty good, obviously, with expanding it to cover dental and glasses, etc. But really, I mean, 65 to 55, is that the best that we can do right now? This is like what Hillary Clinton ran on in 2016, okay? We know that we're dealing with Joe Biden as the president, the guy who said he would veto Medicare for all if it came to his desk after passing the House and the Senate. So we know exactly who we're dealing with in the context of where we are right now. It's not as if I think that Medicare for all is going to be passed immediately or something like that, or that Bernie would even have the power to do that. But basically, part of the Medicare for all strategy in implementing it is you lower that eligibility age over successive years to the point where it eventually covers everybody. And so for the initial step to just be to 55 or 60, that seems like you're not going big enough, honestly. But, it would be better than nothing, obviously. So those major changes will be rolled into the massive infrastructure bill, like we were saying. Democrats are starting to craft. That's likely to include tax policy as well. Sanders said in an interview on Friday that Congress's recent $1.9 trillion coronavirus relief measure was an enormous step forward on the immediate challenges facing the country, but that now we have to look at the structural long-term problems facing our people. Quote, we're talking about physical infrastructure, affordable housing. We're talking about transforming our energy systems to deal with climate change. We're talking about human infrastructure, Sanders said. In the rescue plan, we were able to take a major step forward in lowering child poverty. Very important. Now I want to deal with issues facing seniors as well. So yeah, they did do pretty well with, the child tax credit and stuff that cut child poverty in half, although it's temporary and doesn't really get to the root causes of why there's child poverty in the first place. And that's kind of what Bernie Sanders was pointing out there at the beginning when he said that we have to look at the structural long-term problems facing our people. But yeah, I mean, he is kind of in a way running cover for Democrats on that, the COVID relief package, because, dude, I mean, the $15 minimum wage could have been included in that, and you're just like giving them all of this praise over the bill that they just snubbed you on. That was one of your main policy proposals that you ran on. It was one of the first things Joe Biden promised would be in the as part of his agenda, and they just kind of walked away from it without any pushback. And you're just going to praise that as if that was like some massive new structural change bill. Come on, it wasn't. But okay, so continue on with the details of what he wants to do. Sanders estimated that adding the drug pricing component to the bill would raise $450 billion over 10 years, and that money could go toward expanding Medicare to cover dental, optical, and hearing aids, which he believes would cost about $350 billion. But here's the important part, okay? His mindset, which is kind of why I really wanted to get into this, and this is where I think he's the most correct on this. But as far as total sum of how much new spending Sanders would like to see, the gruff Vermonter demurred on Friday. That's a very weird way to phrase this, but he said he doesn't want to just pick a target. He wants to check off as much as can be done to help people across the country and then figure out how much that would cost. Quote, you don't start off by coming up with a sum and working down. You start out by looking at the needs that need to be addressed and adding them up, he said. So yeah, that's where he is 100% correct. That's the attitude that Democrats need to have with this big package, the infrastructure, the healthcare, the tax policy, etc. And we're going to cover each of these different components as we go and talk about where they're falling short on these things. Clearly, I think that even Bernie Sanders is falling short on the demand for lowering Medicare eligibility, Medicare eligibility age. But the fact of the matter is, Joe Biden has the ability right now via an emergency order or emergency processes to expand Medicare to cover every single American through the duration of the pandemic. Why is Bernie Sanders not calling him out to do that immediately? And that's something that Joe Biden can just do by himself. It wouldn't even have to be in this bill. But, if you're going to be having negotiations in this bill, start out big, go big, start out demanding things that are gigantic, because this is when the negotiations are going to be happening. So if you're Bernie Sanders and you have the leverage that you have, he can block a bill just like Joe Manchin can block a bill. They have equal amounts of leverage that could be wielded in these types of moments. So demand everything, Bernie. Why not demand that the Medicare eligibility age be lowered to 45 or 40? Why are we going to 55 or 60? I mean, it seems like you're not going far enough in these initial demands for the negotiations that are inevitably going to happen. You know that these types of bills, these types of policies are going to be watered down by people like Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Biden and even, Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi and the Democratic establishment. So, go bigger, go big or go home. This is a time where we need to not worry about spending, as Bernie was saying at the end of that article. We need to spend as much as possible in order to invest in the future of the country and in order to start to address some of the underlying issues in this country. So on infrastructure, I said this in my last video covering this bill, go big. There's literally no limit to how much we could spend on infrastructure that would be positive down the road. That would be an investment. And same goes with something like healthcare. We have a completely broken and dysfunctional healthcare system in this country. Our privatized healthcare system causes 500,000 medical bankruptcies a year, and that was pre-pandemic. 40 to 60,000 deaths per year because people can't afford their health insurance. We have tens of millions of people uninsured and underinsured. So, lowering the Medicare eligibility age and expanding it to cover some of these other things, great first step, but really is not going far enough.